Find your seat or another seat if you want to see things from another perspective. Filip, kan vi få upp den där sittbilden för det här samtalet? Welcome back. Try to rip yourself from the interesting conversations that you're having on the way in and dive for a seat so we can get going with these concluding conversations of today. We are entering into the last section of this Återhus so far conference. And the next time you will be released from this space, it's for drinks. Welcome back. Find your seat. Maybe next to someone you haven't spoken to. Good chance to do that. Ja, jag ska ta den på en gång. Okay, let's start to continue. So, guys, please stop having interesting and meaningful exchange with each other and direct your attention once again towards the stage. Did everybody get something to eat and drink? Next time? Yeah, yes, it worked better. Good. How many of you are staying for drinks? Raise of hands. Like a third, maybe. Okay, so those of you who are not, don't miss out to speak to some people before you leave, the ones you haven't spoken to and want to speak to, and exchange some contacts. There will be some kind of something after this conference, some kind of documentation, but it's scary to promise, you know, what that will be. But we will keep you posted. We will collect something from you before we stop, ideas on how to proceed. So you will be part of that discussion as well. What will be the next step for Återhus? Those of you who are still sitting on notes from the great workshop, Open Space, that Åsa led, can you raise your hands? I have some notes that nobody collected. There is one. Can we have someone with feet go and get them? Yeah, right now. Yeah, or we will all forget. So just raise your hands and hand over your notes. While you do that, I will start to explain who we will meet now. The facilitator of these two concluding discussions is someone with very firm connection to the built environments where we live. She has spent many years working with construction, and she is now head of sustainability at HSB. So still in our lived environments, with a focus on both the built infrastructure and the human interaction. There is one in the back as well. Not a word can go to waste. One more to collect at the back. Thanks, and thank you for your persistence. This person We'll facilitate these two conversations with a short break in between where we will do that dancing that I promised. And her name is Louise Wall, and you know how to greet her. Oh, sound is good.
Är den på? Ja. Tack och välkomna till session 3.
Can we still have the seating map, Philip? So, yeah, great. Yeah, perfect.
Det är väl den?
Yeah.
Ja.
Go on.
Vi börjar här. Nu kommer vi fylla scenen med väldigt mycket kompetens. Vi kommer träffa både delar av våra experter från projektet och vi kommer ha pilotrepresentanterna. Jag tänkte börja med att prata om, jag tycker att det pratas om återbruk överallt idag. Hela dagen idag har handlat om det. Det är ett väldigt hett ämne i byggbranschen. Inledningsvis började det inom inredningsbranschen där man började cirkulera möbler och så vidare. Och nu har vi flyttat oss över till tunga byggnadsdelar. Och i och med det så blir det också andra typer av funderingar. Vi har pratat om det en del idag, men nu kommer ni få träffa pilotprojekten här och diskutera vidare just det här. Vad behöver vi tänka på när vi cirkulerar tungt bärande material? Så vi kommer prata om varför ska branschen återbruka? Vad krävs det för att återbruka tunga byggnadsdelar med avseende på kvalitet, säkra garantier och ansvar? Och hur dyrt blir det egentligen? Jag tänker välkomna er alla upp på scenen.
Plats. Yes.
Så på den här sidan har vi då våra experter från arbetspaketen. Och här har vi våra pilotrepresentanter. Jag tänker ni kan börja med att introducera er själva.
Absolut. Anna-Klara Bo heter jag och jobbar på NCC och är då ansvarig för arbetspaket 7 som är kopplat till piloterna.
Ian Lund-Rockcliffe heter jag, konstruktör på Rumble.
Katarina Malaga från RISE. Jag är professor i hållbart byggande men också forskning och affärsansvarig för betongområde.
Jag heter Staffan Virke, arkitekt på Co-design och arbetspaketsledare för arbetspaket 5 som handlar om design för och med återbruk.
Och Emelie Larsson, projektchef från FABG, och jag har ansvarat för pilotprojektet Hållbarhetshuset.
Jonas Wahlström heter jag från Vasakronan och representerar då piloten Hugin från Uppsala.
Och jag heter Emil Junelind från NCC och representerar pilotprojektet Yrket 4.
Jag heter Maria Jansson och kommer från FABG och representerar pilotprojektet Yrket 3 Parkhuset.
Och jag tänkte jag ska först bara berätta jättekort så att ni i publiken som inte känner till piloterna så väl, vad är det de handlar om då? Så att ni på FABG, ni hade ju med den piloten som varit med från starten, Parkhuset Yrket 3. Och i den piloten, och jag kan säga allra först då, att det är kontorsbyggnader alltihopa som ska cirkuleras, där man har gjort utvärdering av handlingar och återbruksinventeringar. Men sen då Yrket 3 Parkhuset är ju den piloten som man har tagit fram den här inventerings- och kvalitetssäkerhetsmetoden. Och projektet har som mål att halvera sin klimatpåverkan där återbruk är en del i det arbetet. Sen har vi Hållbarhetshuset, också FABG, och det representerar du, Emily. Och här har vi hela cirkeln, från demontering till återmontering har testats. Och i det här projektet har ni också haft en stort fokus på tillståndsprocessen och dialog med kommunen och så vidare. Och fått till stånd det här tillfälliga bygglovet som Ruben pratade om vid förra sessionen. Och där också med återbruk av HDF:er. Och så NCC, Forma, Yrket 4. Det är alltså 2 namn för det demonteringsprojektet och nyproduktionsprojektet, om vi ska förtydliga det. Så Forma då, det är ju projekteringsfas och där ni har utvärderat och provtagna betong, eller utvärdering och ni har provtagna betong för återbruk. Och där ska ni skala upp volymer rejält. Så här är det ju återbrukat material med ambition att återbruka 8500 kvadratmeter. Och det är då ett permanent bygglov. Och sen då sist, Hugin, som skiljer sig mest kan man väl säga, färre platsgjuten betong som ska återbrukas. Så här är det liksom tungt på riktigt. Och ni ska såga i den här massiva betongen. Och sen utreder ni också hur ni ska kunna demontera och såga för att kunna återbruka i nästa steg. Och där har ni också utrett scenario för att kunna maximera det här återbruket. Men om vi börjar med den allra första frågan då. Maria, varför ska man återbruka? Och vad är det som har gjort att ni har valt att gå in i Återhusprojektet?
Ja, det är självklart tycker jag nu att vi ska jobba med de här frågorna, återbruk. Och vi vill ju vara en del såklart i utvecklingen, bidra med våra pilotprojekt till forskningsprojektet här, Återhus. Och sen självklart för oss också att lära oss, samla på oss erfarenhet, se om det går.
Och Jonas, ni på Vasakronan, hur resonerade ni när ni fick frågan om att gå med i Återhusprojektet? Och vad är det som har gjort att återbruka som stor del av Hugin?
Ja, men vi vill ju gärna vara med. Vi såg att vi hade liksom ett bra case och för oss är återbruk viktigt. Alltså det räcker inte med bara att göra bra system och materialval utan vi måste få in cirkulariteten på ett annat sätt. Och då är som stommen en betydande del av klimatbelastningen så kändes det jätterelevant att vara med här med Hugin.
Och jag tänker, Emil, det här är inte riktigt, det här med återbruk är inte riktigt som vi traditionellt sett jobbar. Hur skulle du säga att det har liksom påverkat ert projekt och projekteringen?
Ja, men det första är ju då att man får göra en inventering av det hus man ska demontera och sen sätter det ju begränsningar för designen sen för både arkitekt och konstruktör. Att det är någonting att förhålla sig till och försöka nyttja så mycket av materialet som möjligt. Och det som är intressant tycker jag är ju att det blir en del begränsningar då i huset. Och i det här fallet när vi river ett gammalt hus med kortare spännvidder på bjälklagen, då kommer vi behöva bygga ett nytt hus med korta spännvidder, alltså tätare med pelare i huset. Och det som är ännu mer intressant är ju att det också liknar då den typen av spännvidder som man jobbar med i trähus också. Så att jag tycker det man kan ta med sig är ju att vill man jobba med antingen återbruk eller andra typer av träbjälklag eller så vidare så kan man börja med att liksom jobba med kortare spännvidder, tätare pelarindelningar i ett hus. Och det möjliggör då sen att man kan använda sig av återbruk eller andra material. Så det är jättespännande.
Men, och då tänker jag, då behöver du ju ha en ganska nära dialog med arkitekten till exempel. Hur påverkas som era roll, konstruktör och arkitekt i det här? Ian också.
Ja, men jag tänker just precis som Emil var inne på här. Vi behöver komma in väldigt tidigt i projektet, kanske mycket tidigare än vi är vana med. Och börja den här matchningsprocessen emellan återbruket eller med återbruket byggnad och den nya byggnaden. Lite kortare spännvidder som du är inne på som är kanske med från de stömelement som vi har. Så även i ett förstudieskede ska vi göra en besiktning på de här husen, försöka identifiera husen som finns, som kanske ni har inom er fastighet eller andra aktörer har som ska rivas i närheten. Och sen inventera dem, göra en undersökning med detektivarbetet efter relationshandlingen och se vad finns det för element och sen jobba tajt med arkitekten här och verkligen ta vara på det som finns där och påja den nybyggnaden ut efter den befintliga byggnaden.
Ja, jag håller med om det här med att vara med tidigt i processen, för det tror jag är en nyckel. Alltså för det finns väldigt mycket osäkra faktorer och man behöver kanske göra många olika skisser och utredningar för att anpassa ett nytt projekt till ett gammalt material som har osäkerheter i sig. Och sen arkitektrollen är ju intressant för det finns ju arkitekter på alla möjliga nivåer, alltifrån detaljplan till liksom inredning. Och det finns eftersom det är mycket arkitekter här idag också vet jag, att det finns ju sätt att bidra till det här på alla nivåer. Alltifrån alltså tidiga skisser på stadsplaner till liksom ombyggnads- och renoveringsprojekt. Men sen är det intressant också det här som du lyfter med träbyggnad. Och då är det ju också, och parkhuset är ett sånt exempel som från början var tänkt som en träbyggnad med tanke på koldioxidavtrycket. Men där vi också kunde då komplettera med bjälklagselement från yrke 3 då, som skulle rivas. Och det passar ganska bra. Så att det tror jag kan vara ett bra sätt att kombinera med ett lågt CO2-avtryck, få till en fungerande byggnad med både trä och återbrukad betong.
Mm. Men blir det ett annat process för er? Kan ni jobba precis som vanligt? Eller hur jobbar ni när ni jobbar i...
Nej, det blir en annan process, alltså traditionellt sett. Nu har vi inte ritat färdigt något sånt här hus från ax till limpa, så jag kan inte svara på hur det blir alla delar. Men man måste ju släppa lite på en del saker som arkitekter normalt sett känner att vi vill ha kontroll på. Man kanske får släppa lite på estetiken, på vissa utformningar av byggnader där materialet låser på ett annat sätt. Så att jag tror att från alla sidor måste man ge och ta lite grann. Och det är därför det är viktigt också med den här, att alla jobbar tillsammans i en större konsultgrupp från ett tidigare skede. Då.
Mm. Och det som man gjorde väldigt tidigt var att ta fram den här kvalitetssäkringsprocessen och den metoden för att kunna säkerställa att kvaliteten faktiskt var så pass god att det gick att återbruka. För liksom grunden i hela Återhusprojektet. Och där har ju ni haft en viktig roll, Katarina, från RISEs sida. När material liksom inte kommer direkt från en leverantör och det har använts innan, så är det ju alltså kvalitetssäkring blir ju väsentlig i det här. Hur har ni jobbat med det?
Ja, jag skulle bara poängtera det att vi på RISE tittar framförallt på materialet. Dimensionerna och spännvidd, det är kanske sekundärt för oss i det här fallet. Men jag tänkte bara att betongmaterialet idag är inte samma material som var för 20, 30, 50 eller 60 år sedan. Så att det är otroligt viktigt att veta vad det här materialet som vi undersöker ska ju användas till. Det var ju väldigt många som pratade om bilar innan. Och jag tänkte bara säga, om vi beställer en Tesla så vill vi inte ha en Volvo 240. Men det är ungefär samma sak här. Så att man måste ju undersöka det materialet som man vill eller ämnas för att användas till något annat. Ska det vara bjälklag eller ska det vara fasader eller pelare eller något annat? Då finns det ju faktiskt beräkningsmetoder för det. Och vi kan inte tumma på kvalitet. Vi ska inte ställa lägre kvalitet på det här återanvända materialet än det som vi egentligen skulle ju kunna använda som nytt. Så att det är ju så. Vi har tagit fram en metodik för det. Och den bygger ju på den här erfarenheten som vi har. Och vi använder ju ganska mycket okulära bedömningar. Men vi använder ju också instrument som liknar ju en hammare. Så vi lyssnar ju på det, om det är sunt material eller inte. Vi tar prover, men vi också använder ju icke-destruktiva metoder. Så att det finns en radda med tester där vi försöker ju säkra ju den här kvaliteten, så att det blir ju samma kvalitet som man skulle använda ett ny betong.
Mm. Och det är lite intressant. Vi kravställer ju inte när vi cirkulerar in det i ett nytt projekt, så måste ju materialet hålla samma kvalitet oavsett om det är återbrukat eller om det är ett nytt material. Och det får man faktiskt ha med sig. Och det är det också man har lyckats bevisa i det här projektet. Ja, jag vet inte, vill ni komplettera något?
Jag kan komplettera lite det som är inne på de här testningen som vi behöver göra. Det finns också de här relationshandlingar om vi som konstruktör kan hitta dokumentation från byggnaden när den byggdes. Ju med till och med även beräkning ibland. Då kan vi anpassa testning som behövs utifrån just det specifika objektet. Och sen inom de pilotprojekten som vi har gjort har det visat sig väldigt bra kvalitet på till exempel prefabricerade element som tillverkas inom fabrik. Då ser man väldigt låg karbonisering om de är inbyggda i ett kontorsbyggnad. Man ser en tillitlighet på betongkvaliteten när vi gör tester på borrning och även fullskaliga tester. Så det ser väldigt bra möjligheter tekniskt mässigt att kunna återanvända elementen i nya byggnader. Framförallt om det är kontor till kontor. Det är liknande miljöer, det är liknande laster och så vidare.
Och den här kvalitetssäkringen som beskrivs här, hur hanteras den sen av er fastighetsägare när ni ska bygga nytt? Jag tänker som Emelie, ni har jobbat jättemycket i ert projekt med tillståndsprocessen och dialog med kommunen för att få till stånd det här bygglovet. Kan du berätta lite om det?
Nej, men dels har det ju varit en fråga från kommunen för att ge oss bygglov hur vi kan säkerställa de här elementen. Och då har vi ju tagit fram, med hjälp också av konstruktörer, den här metodiken. Och det har ju också gjort att kommunerna har känt sig trygga och har kunnat ge oss bygglov. Så det har ju varit en förutsättning för att vi ska komma vidare. Och det är ju inte bara kommuner som ska känna sig trygga, det är ju också vi. Alla ska ju på något vis kunna gå i god för att det fungerar. Så det finns ju en anledning till det, såklart.
Och hur kändes det i början då? Hur var den här processen? Har det varit tuff eller hur har det fungerat?
Ja, men jag skulle säga, i vårt fall så hade vi nog också en väldigt positiv kommun. Vi jobbade väldigt tajt ihop med Solna. De var jättepositiva till det här. Och det är klart att det har ju också bidragit. De har velat vara lyhörda och öppna. Och för oss gick det ganska snabbt, men vi fick väldigt mycket frågor. Och vi var såklart tvungna att kunna verifiera. Det blev mer dokumentation. Men jag tycker att det har varit en bra process och en bra dialog.
Tror du att det varit en skillnad om det har varit ett permanent bygglov eller ett tillfälligt bygglov?
Ja, det tror jag. Jag tror att tryggheten för oss var att vi börjar det här är ju ett tillfälligt bygglov vi har. Och det är kanske också det som har gjort att vi förhoppningsvis nu också kan bygga med permanent bygglov framöver.
Och det bådar ju gott eftersom vi har fler i pipen så att säga. Det har ju pratats, sessionen innan här och även under dagen har vi pratat ganska mycket om kostnader och värden av återbruk och provtagningsbiten och den biten. Men Jonas, jag vet att du brukar resonera kring det här med kostnad och värde. Tycker du att det är en kostnad med återbruk?
Ja, men i vissa avseenden är det klart en kostnad. Det är lite mera tid och arbete då i ett tidigt skede och inventering och verifiering och sådana saker och komma på hur ska vi använda det här. Men liksom på sista raden så då ska man inte se som kostnad. Det är liksom att inte liksom vara tydlig med hållbarhet i sin verksamhet. Det är liksom inte affärsmässigt. Så och dessutom om vi tar återbruk då och i dagens läge med leveransstök och kostnadsstök så ser jag det som det talar ju ännu mer för återbruk. För då har du ju grejerna.
Så kortare ledtider?
Ja. Så jag ser ju egentligen nästan bara uppsidor på det.
Ja, vad säger ni andra?
Nej, men jag håller med Jonas där att det finns ju andra parametrar som måste vägas in och det som tidigare också nämnts här med 2 kalkyler. Vi pratar både den monetära och den CO2-kalkylen som man måste väga hur man ska fatta besluten efter. Sen om du jämför nu kanske en bjälklagsplatta mot en bjälklagsplatta så är ju den återbrukare tyvärr fortfarande lite dyrare att hantera. Men på sikt när vi skalar upp där kanske det kommer i kapp.
Ja.
Och framförallt måste man ju väga in värdeaspekten också. Att den är värd kanske mer än en nyproducerad då. För att det finns andra aspekter också i det.
Jag tänkte bara lägga till också med drivkrafter. Man kan skapa sig egna drivkrafter också i sin affärsmodell eller så. Och just det här att lägga in ett begrepp klimatskuld är ju rätt så viktigt. Det bör man göra om man ska riva en befintlig byggnad och inte göra någonting av den. Då ska man ta in den skulden man har vid den rivningen i sin klimatberäkning. Och klimatberäkning måste ju vara en del av beslutsunderlaget för att få ett projekt.
Ja, för det är lite intressant. För ni på Vasakronan räknar ju med en klimatskuld för allt som ni river, eller hur? Ja. Och kan du berätta lite mer för publiken? Vad är en klimatskuld då?
Nej, men klimatskuld, vi sätter ett värde då man tar vad är det för livslängd på en stomme till exempel, om vi säger 100 år då, på en betongstomme, och så river vi en byggnad efter 50 år. Då har du och så sätter man in då vad betongens värde är då, MCPD eller så, i beräkningen. Då har du en belastning i klimatkalkylen, klimatberäkningen direkt, som kan vara rätt avgörande.
För den nya fastigheten?
Ja. För det nya. För klimatbelastningen ska ju med i beslutsunderlaget till det nya vi bygger.
Men det är lite intressant. Det finns olika incitament hur man kan ställa krav på sig själv. Vi hörde innan Atrium Ljungbergs exempel där och det här. Det finns säkert fler exempel på hur man kan jobba med att få in miljö- och hållbarhetsaspekter i kalkylen. Jag tänkte flytta fokus lite till det här med matchningen också, material och tillgång och efterfrågan. Vi diskuterade lite innan, det har också diskuterats i den här fokuset på liksom vad är en cirkulär ekonomi och hur man får till stånd ett återbruk. Nu är ju piloterna kanske liksom just piloter och vi har haft exceptionellt positiva liksom, vad ska man säga, riggningar med att man har ett demonteringsobjekt och ett nyproduktionsprojekt ganska nära varandra. Det är också samma ägare till materialet, vilket har också lyfts idag. Men om man bara liksom resonerar lite kopplat till det här med material och matchning och kanske även leverantör. Liksom hur tänker ni kring det både nu och framåt? Är det någon som vågar svara på den? Jag tänker just här, om man ska få till stånd ett återbruk på lite mer uppskalning, då behöver man ju få till det här.
Ja, men jag tycker det kan man ju ganska tydligt se att jobba så här, det är egentligen för långsamt. Det är för långa ledtider och man blir för beroende av att något ska rivas i samma tid som det ska då byggas. Och om inte så kräver det massa lagring och så vidare. Så jag tycker det är ganska naturligt att se att i förlängningen så ritar man flexibelt och så får man se vad man kan ta emot. Vad finns det för återbruksmaterial att ta emot i en byggnad framöver? Att det kan gå direkt in i ett nytt resursflöde istället. Till exempel Contiga liksom levererar då när de har fått liksom återbrukade. Och man kanske till och med kan betala mer för om man får tillgång till återbrukade element framöver. Så det behöver gå mer direkt in i nya projekt framöver.
Och sen, det vi har diskuterat också lite i det här projektet innan handlar ju om det här liksom med formen på byggnaderna och att som var ett optimalt återbruksprojekt. Hur får man till det? Du pratade lite om spännvidder och pelare innan. Och Parkhuset har ju haft en lite speciell form.
Ja, Parkhuset har ju en böjd form på ena fasaden på grund av att det går en spårväg precis utanför, så att vi är styrda av den. Och det är ju inte om vi ska skala upp det här sen, så är inte det en optimal form på ett hus som man ska återbruka. Så att men nu var det ju så att det följer spåret och det är en detaljplansprocess som hade påbörjats när vi tog in återbruksaspekten. Men i den bästa världen så kanske man börjar lite mer i andra änden nästa gång.
Och jag tänker, för lite så har jag uppfattat att man gjorde i hållbarhetshuset istället. Man tittade på demonteringsobjektet och matade in det mot nyproduktionen. Och där arkitektens roll var viktig. Kan du berätta lite, Emelie?
Ja, men precis. Dels hade vi ganska tajt om tid och vi hade ju ett projekt på fastigheten som vi hade beslutat sedan tidigare att vi skulle riva. Så vi gav ju egentligen arkitekten i uppdrag att titta över hur mycket material kan vi återbruka och spara och vad kan vi också göra för typ av gestaltning av det här materialet. Så det blev ju att vi startade med materialet, försökte hitta en gestaltning. Och det kan man ju också säga att den här gestaltningen den förändrades ju lite grann under processen. Både för det fasadmaterial och allt annat material vi hittade, men också för att stommen förändrades. Det här var ju en process under tiden egentligen, det här med att få fram hur vi ska verifiera elementen. Så från början var huset i en dimension och när vi hade tittat på elementen och insåg att vi måste kapa dem så blev det lite mindre. Och sen tror jag när vi var färdiga med verifieringen så blev det ytterligare lite mindre. Så att det var många revideringar. Men det är också intressant, det är ju det vi tar lärdom av i en sån här process.
Och jag tänker det handlar återigen om, jag tycker vi pratar om det hela dagen, men det handlar ju väldigt mycket om det här med liksom dialog, samverkan, att jobba väldigt nära tillsammans. Och du nämnde ju, Anna-Klara, när du fick första frågan här på scenen, vad tyckte du var the work together? Det var någon annan som, du sa väl också samverkan. Och Anna-Klara, du leder ju ett arbetspaket som handlar om just det, samverkan mellan piloterna. Kan du, liksom, hur viktigt tycker du är för att få till stånd det här återbruket?
Ja, men det är ju jätteviktigt och det var därför jag tyckte det var så viktigt också att lyfta just samverkan. För att det är ju dels, både Ian och Staffan har varit inne på det, kopplat till specifika byggprojekt så är ju samverkan grundläggande för att komma in i tidiga skeden och just det här med dimensioner och om en kvalitetssäkring och jobba tillsammans för att hitta rätt. Men jag vill också passa på att lyfta just det här med samverkan i innovationsprojektet Återhus. För att det är ju lite det som har varit den här rollen. Och genom att man har haft den här gemensamma målsättningen om att se över återbruket har ju också gjort att innovationsprojektet faktiskt har drivit branschen framåt och utmanat den där normala byggprocessen som vi vanligtvis är vana vid. Och har bidragit till dels minskad klimatpåverkan som jag tycker är jätteviktigt att många lyfter, men också det här med resursuttag som också är en jätteviktig fråga. Så samverkan är ju grundläggande för att driva det framåt.
Tack.
Jag skulle även tillägga just samverkan inom branschen också. Det här kommer inte kunna bara ske inom några organisationer här, och det som vi har fått lära oss om kvaliteten på material och de testningar som vi har gjort att kommunen har tillit på allting. Det måste spridas och användas i andra projekt med andra beställare också, så att hela branschen känner sig tryggare. Att det finns en möjlighet att återbruka om det hålls plattor eller stålbalkar, om man följer en viss standard som man bygger upp. Att det här kommer inte bara lösas inom några pilotprojekt och några modiga fastighetsägare. Det är hela branschen som ska vara öppet med vad vi har lärt oss.
Jag kan ju bara hålla med. Sen tycker jag så fort jag lyfter frågan om återbruk i olika sammanhang så får jag hela tiden frågan så här, men det här med garantierna då, hur ska vi lösa det och ansvaret och nej, det här känns läskigt. Om ni resonerar kring den frågan. För jag tycker det är ganska spännande när man har ställt en återbrukssammanhang och så får man höra liksom så där, skiter lite där med garantierna, eller? Vad säger ni om man pratar garantier?
Ja, men det blir ju någonstans, kan man göra enligt den här metodiken som vi har tagit fram, så tycker jag då spelar det ju faktiskt ingen roll om man har ett nyproducerat material eller om man kör ett återbrukat. Jag tycker vi har ju kommit så långt så att vi kan vara trygga med det. Och någonstans garanti eller inte, någonstans så sitter man ju med, som fastighetsägare så sitter man ju i alla fall med det totala ansvaret. Det är ju svårt att peka på att det var dens fel om det händer någonting, utan det kommer ju alltid vara man som fastighetsägare som står där med ansvaret ändå.
Vad säger ni andra?
Jo, men ofta är det ju faktiskt så. Sen kanske det också beror på vilken typ av produkt vi pratar om. Men om man tänker ansvarsmässigt så vore det ju fint om man kunde hitta ett sätt där man allihopa egentligen tar en del av det. Men sen är det ju som ni säger, i slutändan är det ju fastighetsägaren som också får stå för.
Blir det riktigt jobbigt då är det alltid fastighetsägaren som får betala på. Så är det. Men det är väl lite mer jobb i ett tidigt skede då, just när det gäller stomme med garantier. Men vi håller ju på i kvarteret Hugen nu med etapp 1. Det här tänker vi är etapp 2. Och då är det också återbruk, men inte stomme, men i princip allt annat. Och vi sitter just nu med upphandlingar och det är, alltid kommer den frågan upp. Men jag säger att ni behöver inte bekymra om det för att vi tar hand om det, för det blir som vanligt.
Det blir som vanligt, det hör du va? Jag tänkte att tiden går ju fort när man har kul och vi börjar närma oss slutet. Men jag tänker att ni alla ska få skicka med någonting till publiken från era erfarenheter från just Återhus. Jag tänker att vi kan börja där.
Någon erfarenhet?
Ja, erfarenhet eller någonting som du vill dela med eller skicka med till publiken.
Ja, men jag tror att den största erfarenheten som jag har tagit med mig är bara att det går. Alltså att det funkar. Absolut.
Nej, men ett sätt, det här är en av de verktygen som vi har som en bransch att minska vår klimatpåverkan är faktiskt återbruka. Det är en av många, så jag kommer ta med mig det till mina kommande uppdrag.
Jag tänkte ju säga att man ska ju tänka egentligen på teknisk prestanda och tänka ju på de här faktorerna man ställer på vilka material som helst och inte på åldern. Den faktorn finns inte i några beräkningar.
Jag kan bara hålla med Anna-Klara igen här att största insikten är att det är inga tekniska problem, utan att det handlar om att göra en bra research och en noggrann kvalitetskontroll. Och sen finns det andra utmaningar som mer handlar om strukturer och processer på andra plan än just det tekniska. Så att det är väl där vi ska fortsätta nu.
Ja, men jag tror det är att jag upplever att det har varit ett stort engagemang från alla. Och inte bara ifrån det här gänget utan också ifrån de utifrån som har varit del av våra projekt. Allt ifrån konsulter och entreprenörer och leverantörer. Att det har funnits en vilja att testa och våga utmanas och utvecklas också. Det har jag tyckt varit jättepositivt.
vad ska jag säga för smart? Jag vet inte, men egentligen kan jag väl bara lägga in att våga tänka att det gamla är det nya.
Och jag tänker att med kompetens så är det lättare än man tror. Så det är bara att våga prova, tycker jag.
Jag tycker att det har varit färre frågor som har varit problematiska än vad jag kanske trodde när jag gick in i det här. Som garantier till exempel. Tänkte jag också att det kommer bli en stor fråga. Men nej, det var den minsta frågan, tror jag. Så att det finns bara möjligheter.
Ja, men om vi ska försöka sammanfatta den här diskussionen i 3 punkter så skulle jag säga att fastighetsägarna, ni vill jobba med återbruk. Vi har kompetensen för att göra det. Och det verkar inte som att vi har några obstacles, inga problem för att få göra det här, utan det är bara att våga och köra. Va? Tack för mig, tack till er i panelen och tack till publiken. En varm applåd.
Tack snälla. Tusen tack. Tack panelen. Now again there will be some movement here. You will leave the stage. Furnitures will be moved around. Please stand up. Find your chest, this part of your body, and move it from side to side. If you have no idea what this is, then you can sort of look chest side to side. That's it. Yeah, that's it. Good. And then move it back and forth a little bit. And then do this kind of break dance-ish movements. Yeah, you look good. I strongly recommend that you all stay for the drinks. Okay, and shake it a little bit. And then roll your head around gently so you don't crack your neck. And maybe take the opportunity to do that little bit of that blissful sighing. Okay, now find your hips and move them from side to side. This is the dancing part of the conference, so make the most of it. From side to side, hips is normally easier than the chest. Yeah, looking good, do some salsa. Side to side, and then roll them around. You can do this. I know you can. Yes, you can. And the other way around. Yes, yes, you have it. And now shake that part of your body that is called tush with the beautiful Yiddish word. Shake it good, please. Because this is a part of your, don't stop just because I'm talking, shake it all the time. Exactly. This is a part of the body where we store all kinds of tensions. No biological reason for that, we just do it. So let it just resume its natural shape, shake it. Good. Now wiggle your eyebrows, maximum speed. Maximum speed, eyebrow wiggling. You never know when you're going to need this. In what meeting this will be the deal breaker. So maximum eyebrow wiggling. Good. Now ears, if you can, at least give it a try. Most of us look like this when we do, but then, you know, just give it a try. Your nose. Be that sort of eager dog, smelling. This can also be very important ability. Very good. Now do a little bit of kissing. So do this kiss that have no lips. You know, when you were a kid and someone said, go and kiss your aunt, and you were like, I don't want to. That kiss. Yeah, you got it. Now, very pointed, very specific, maybe not so pleasant, but clear. Very good. Now, straight out of surgery, maximum lip. Yes, yes, people. Very good. Now a little bit of chewing. Maybe make yourself a little bit taller. Okay, have a seat, please. Thank you. We are going to open one more window, and that is the window to our neighboring countries. So we welcome Louise back with a smaller panel, an exclusive one, and let's give them an applause.
Thank you, Pernilla, for keeping the energy high in the room at this late hour of the day. So shall we have a seat? So welcome to the last part of session 3. And we will have a talk amongst 3 specialists within the circular construction business with a Nordic perspective. And we go into this session. We've talked today and listened to a lot of good presentations, and we know that we're in the middle of a global crisis, a climate crisis, and that our planet's resources are being overused. And we also know that the construction and property business accounts for a large part of these, the use of these resources, as well as the waste created and the climate emissions that occur from this. And we're also facing scarcity of materials in general. So we have all these obstacles. So this sector, therefore a large part of the global challenges, but also a part of this solution. And as we heard today in the presentations and in the panel discussions, we need to start to look at our built environment as a resource. All right? And this must be done both here, but also on a global scale. So in this session, we will talk about how successful are we today in Scandinavia in reusing materials? What are the major obstacles for reusing materials on a larger scale? And where will we be in 5 years? So I will be moderating the session, but we will start by hearing a presentation from you, Erland. Erland Seilsker, did I say it right?
Yeah, close enough.
Architect from Future Build in Norway, and you will talk about the Circle Pilot from Norway.
Yeah, thank you.
Give a warm applause to Erland.
My presentation is not on yet. But,
so, Philip.
Oh.
I can give you sympathy, but no real help. So, Philip.
It's very nice to be here, and I feel there's so much
good work.
competence
He's fast.
in this room. So
yes.
Okay.
sorry, it's the wrong one. Yeah, yes, this one. Excellent. Bad start, but yeah, I'm from Future Build in Norway, and we are an innovation program, and just took some sample images from projects that we're working on. So it's important for us to work in every scale, and simple or complex projects, and public and private, we believe, and that's sort of our slogan, that we believe in the power of a good example, and we want to make these pilots in cooperation with different developers and show what is possible. And we work in these 6 municipalities in the Oslo area, and we also have a few other partners, as you can see. And we work with a quite wide range of sustainability topics, and as you can see, some of them are obligatory, so every project has to use them, whereas other are optional, and circular buildings is one of those. So first of all, there's a pretty dark backdrop for this, because we have this climate crisis that is urgent, and we have audited a lot of reuse materials that we use in our projects, and we have not yet found a single product that had a CO2 saving less than 89%. So that means that reuse is really an efficient measure to take. And we also have this nature crisis, where we know that all the building materials that we use, they affect nature somehow. So what we need to do is also to limit our outtake. And then we have the waste problem as well. where we represent about 1/3 of the national waste, and a lot of that is perfectly usable components. So I think we also owe to keep them in the circle as long as possible. And then with my architect background, I also think we have an architecture crisis where we have created a sort of a dull international style. It looks alike all over the world, and we got boring, disposable buildings, and we cannot continue in that manner, I think. And then I won't go into detail because it's late in the afternoon, but I'll just show sort of the ambition for the projects of ours. So this orange figure that you see is the path that the building sector in Norway has to undertake in order to meet the obligations from the Paris Agreement. And as you can see, we need to do a quite steep reduction, and it's also a dynamic range. That's very important. So the longer ahead you plan, the stricter you need to be on your CO2 budget. And then the green figure, it shows the future build project. So that's our pilots, and they have to apply to that. And that means that they have to be half the carbon budget of the regular buildings. And by that we are aiming to be 10 years ahead of the industry, so that we could bring up examples that could sort of educate the rest of the sector. And to get there, we also need to improve the circularity, and now we are working on this circularity index in order to ensure that at least we're aiming for 100% by 2050. And here the green line is the national building sector in general, and the red line is the future built pilots. And the easiest and most efficient measures that we can take is to extend the lifespan of the buildings. And the resources are already extracted, and the carbon is embodied in the building materials. And I would also argue that transformation of buildings has an architectural potential that we really need to value. And here are some samples from transformation projects that we've done, and some of them are kept very much like, some of them are preserved, for instance, or listed for historic reasons, whereas others have got this sort of new outer coat due to energy sufficiency. And I've also taken with me a couple of pictures on projects that we're working on now. So this is sort of before and after images. So this is an example where the developer, as they often do, they wanted to extend the building, and we convinced them not to demolish more than they had to, and then we found that the foundations and the building structure, it couldn't support more stories, until we discovered that by using lightweight wood construction, we could also do this on fill, on top, and sort of do this lightweight extension. And this is a bit similar. It's a project we're working on with a very typical industrial building in Oslo, and as you can see, it's a quite boring building, but it's still a quite carbon-intensive structure. So we were a bit anxious when they wanted to tear it down to make space for a new building, but then we convinced them, because we did a lot of climate calculations and found out that we had to keep this old building. And again, we had this problem with the structure. We couldn't support the stories on top. But then we did the solution with the stilts built around the original building, so that we both can keep the building and have this addition on top. So and now we're working on a way to make the extension out of reused materials and at least reusable construction. This is also a bit similar example, but the scale is completely different. So this is an enormous building that sits just next to the railway station in Oslo, and it's not a pretty building, and it also blocks the urban situation. We didn't quite know what to do. It's an old postal building, so we didn't even need that function anymore. But the concrete structure in this case, it represents an enormous carbon storage. So we wanted to keep the structure, and we managed to convince the client that we could do what you see on the right, that we keep the structure and then we build 2 towers on top. Or they're actually going through the old construction. And that was quite good because just the load-bearing structure of this building alone consists of 50,000 cubic meters of concrete. So it would require more than 3,000 lorries only to drive off with the old concrete. And then you have to drive the same amount back to make a new building. So I'm really glad that they made that decision. And here are some illustrations on how we remove the facade of the old building because we don't need that, and then we can also carve out large chunks of it in order to provide this new entrance to the railway station on the other side. Sometimes we have to demolish buildings, and then we try to consider the buildings as material mines, where we can go and harvest materials, and we do this analysis to find out what objects can be used again. And then we map everything, small and large, and usually we use digital tools for this, but for the first pilots you see that we also did it in a quite analog fashion, so that it's also possible. And I mean, the analog part of this is also very important because we need a lot of storage space, especially when we build in dense urban environments. There's no way we could put the materials when we are building. And it looks a bit small on this image, on this sort of wasteland, but we are now building this pilot in Oslo. It's an old tent that we got. 4,500 square meters, where we can offer intermediate storage for not only our projects, but also other projects going on in Oslo area. So we are building it right now, and I hope that it will be in action within a couple of months. And of course, it's a reused tent. We try, of course, not to demolish more than we have, but instead we try to dismount the buildings. When the components cannot be used in the project itself, they must either be sold off or offered to other projects, such as the partition walls that you see here. And the market is quite small for used materials in Norway, but it's growing, and there are many actors coming on board these days, so it's a quite interesting development, at least. And then we have other unique features in buildings, such as the teak frame windows that you can see. And they were maintained in the project so that they didn't meet the energy requirements of today. So we took out the glazing and put in new, and then we could keep this beautiful old frame and have a modern standard window. And I mean, circular buildings, they are about sustainability, but it's also about storytelling and maintaining the character of the building. And here you see the finished building. And in this case, we transformed a historic building into modern offices. And in my opinion, I think we kept the spirit of the old building, but what is more important is that 90% of the weight of the building consists of materials that are either kept, reused, or reusable. And then we have some small-scale pilots, and they can be useful also to experiment a bit and to try out new solutions. So it doesn't necessarily have to be big. But of course, it's the big and heavy materials that are most important carbon-wise. And when materials like steel and concrete and bricks are first produced, we ought to keep them as long as we can. And This is one of the very first reinforced concrete buildings ever built in Norway. And the structure has a sort of a generality that allows an old storehouse to turn into modern offices. So now it's been transformed according to the circular criteria that we use, and the concrete is ready to last another century, I would suppose. And then we have these two brick examples with reused bricks, so I'm glad the audience are willing to pay more for used bricks. And I think the quality of those bricks, it provides something extraordinary to the projects, and I'm very happy that we could do it that way. And when we do it, it's also important that we use soft mortars, so that we also can dismantle the bricks afterwards and use them again and again. So that's also something we should keep in mind, because otherwise we end up with a disposable facade if we would use cement mortar instead. And this is also our office, and it was the building I was talking about with the QR codes, and that was the first circular house that we did in Norway. And here we used materials from more than 20 different buildings, and even technical equipment from donor buildings we used. And that is very important, this being an office building, because they throw out the ventilation like every 10th year. So in many cases, the technical systems in office buildings, they will make out like 20% of the total carbon budget. And that is also important to keep in mind, that the short lifespan has a lot to say for the carbon. The facade is made from 3 different buildings and consists of 3 different materials. And the facade alone gave a 97% carbon reduction compared to a new facade. And in total, 80% of this building is circular somehow, and that has given a 70% carbon reduction from the material side. Perhaps the most important reuse in this building was the reuse of hollow core concrete slabs that was never done in Norway before, and that was a very expensive and difficult process, but it also provided us with a lot of experiences that we could use, so that Skanska, that was our partner, they could later on use the experiences to make an industry standard for reuse of hollow core slabs. And that is, very important because it's a widely available material, and it has a huge capacity for storing CO2. And a few decades ago, all our buildings, more or less, were reusable. And we need to develop new ways to disassemble buildings and components without reducing the material capacity. So that means that instead of welding, gluing, and casting, we must use reversible joints, such as bolts, screws, and soft mortars. And that enables us to use the materials many times. And if we are able to make simpler buildings with fewer materials, they will be easier to reuse and maintain in the future. So reusability is a sort of a low-hanging fruit that has gained a lot of popularity within the building industry, because it's sort of an easy measure to take. But then it's important to bear in mind what I also said earlier today, that reusability is not as important as reuse itself, so we must not forget that one. And lastly, with my architect background again, I would encourage you to look for the new possibilities that reuse provide. And we must not only close the material loops, but also invent a new style and a new architecture with old materials. So my hope is that circular thinking also can give us a more interesting architecture. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Erland. We will talk more about that in the panel. It was really, really interesting to hear about. And in the panel, Erland will be joined by Katja Udvik Christensen. Did I say it right? Yeah. And you are the business manager of Precast from the Danish Technological Institute, right?
Yes.
Yes. Applaud for Katja. And then we have Satu Huka. Did I say that right? Yeah. And you are the scientific leader from Recreate, and you're the associated professor at Tampere University in Finland. Welcome. So we will continue with the presentation each from you guys before we start the panel. So who's up first?
I guess it's
Satu.
me. Yes. So I suppose I'm able to find my file here.
Yeah, the tension in the room. So can we get some help here for the presentation?
I have it here, but not over there. Let me retry. Thanks. Though it's still not there. Yes. Thank you so much. So I'm very pleased to introduce the project Recreate to you today. As I said, I'm an associate professor at Tampere University, and I have a research group over there of 8 people called RESET. That's short for Renovation and Circular Economy Transition. And Recreate is one of our top projects at the moment. So it's funded from the EU's Horizon framework program. And Recreate is short for Reusing Precast Concrete for a Circular Economy. As far as we know, it's the only project that the Horizon program is funding that's specifically focusing on reuse. There have been other projects that work mainly with recycling, but then touch upon reuse. However, we are focusing on reuse as the first project in this program. We started last year, and we will be running for 2.5 years more. In Recreate, we are studying the reuse of whole deconstructed concrete elements, such as hollow core slabs, as in Erland's project, columns, beams, wall elements, massive slabs, etc. And we are focusing on buildings that have been not designed for deconstruction, so we're not put off by that, but we're convinced that reuse is possible nonetheless. As an EU-funded project, we are international, so we're operating in 5 European countries, Finland, Sweden, Germany, the Netherlands, and Croatia. The Croatian Green Building Council takes care of our communications because we have buildings of precast concrete elements in the east of Europe, so we're focusing on those areas in our communication. However, in the other 4 countries, we are piloting, so each of the countries will have or is having a deconstruction pilot as well as a reuse pilot where elements will be deconstructed and will be reused in new buildings. We're looking at the whole value chain, which starts from an existing building and ends in a new building with reused components, with the phases of deconstruction, factory refurbishment / productization, including quality management processes. Of course, building design is focal as well, whether structures or architecture, and then the actual construction. And of course, in everything, public policy and regulation comes into play, so that's a focal area for us as well. we have a holistic approach to reuse, so we are not only looking at technological things, such as the deconstruction or how you organize for the logistics and the processing and the quality management and redesign and all of that. So those are the things which are vertically over there, but then we're also looking at the environmental impacts, the business aspects, and social aspects, sociology of work aspects, and the regulatory aspects in every step of the way. And the pilots that I just mentioned, they are a focal tool for us to do research on these matters. Here you can see who we are. So Tampere University is leading the project internationally and in Finland. And here in Sweden, KTH and Erik Stenberg, who is at the back, is leading the Swedish cluster. So if you want to reach out about Recreate, feel free to contact me, or you can contact Erik in Swedish. I'm sure he's happy to tell you more. And we have some amazing companies, innovative companies here as well, such as the Consolis Group, who are manufacturers of concrete elements, or Skanska, though in Finland, Arambol, and other companies as well, as you can see here on this slide. Thank you for your attention. And now I give the floor to Katri. Maybe you'll manage better with the files than I did.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to come here today. So, as Louisa said, my name is Katja, and I come from the Danish Technological Institute. And for those of you who doesn't know what that company is, we're not a university, but we are a private, non-profit, self-owned company. And I just learned from my panelists, fellow panelists, that apparently that is kind of weird, but I don't know. Anyways, I work with research and development within the field of concrete technology. So for some people, this might sound very narrow, but I think actually it's kind of a broad topic. So just a quickly introduction to the project that I'm working with. It's called Precast, and it's funded by the Environmental Ministry in Denmark. And the purpose of this project is to look at direct reuse of precast concrete elements. We're only looking at existing buildings, and we want to reuse them as load-bearing structures in new buildings. And because this project is not as big as maybe Recreate and other projects, we decided to minimize the scope a little bit. So we're only focusing on 2 to 3 types, and we're planning to look at walls, hollow core slabs, and TT elements. And what we hope to do with this project is to create the basis for an industrial implementation of reused precast concrete elements. And we just started this January this year, so still a quite new project. So, here we go. This is the project partners. We're 13 partners in total and include the entire value chain. And I'll just skip through this pretty fast because I'm limited on time. So just quickly what we're looking at in this project. Firstly, we're looking at the demolition, both how you can do it technically, but also the planning and the safety of the demolition process. Then we're looking into the documentation, how we can document the reused precast elements for new use. We're also looking into incorporation of the elements into new buildings. And I just took an example here of some of the joints we're looking at. So we're working with walls, and what we found out in the project is that often these are not reinforced. So this gives us some issues also when we have to do new connections in them. So I think at the end of this month, we will do the first test of one of the joints that was designed in the project here. But we're also looking into the overall system, the structural system of the building, and how we should do that. Maybe we should do it a little bit differently than we do today, as well as the whole collaboration between architects, construction engineers, and contractors. Then we look into implementation. We look back in the past at the legislation to see how did we used to build. We look at the current legislation, and then we look at the future legislation to see where is there opportunities for us in what we know is the upcoming legislation. And all this knowledge that we will generate in the project, we hope to put into a tool that you can use to evaluate or estimate the reuse potential of different concrete elements. It could be, for example, based on a type of element, it could be on production year, the type of building is used in, dimensions, and so on. And then lastly, we'll demonstrate this through both physical and virtual demonstrations, where we try to work with the method we developed throughout the whole value chain, from demolition to building of a new building. And that's it. I don't know how I did on time.
Well, thank you for a very interesting start to this panel discussion. There's so much knowledge here. And our first, it feels like you've already answered the first question. The first question is, how successful are we today in Scandinavia and in reusing? And maybe you have solved it all, but Katja, if we start with you, how successful do you think Denmark is in moving towards a circular economy?
I think it really depends on the material you look at. So I think for some materials we're further along than others. For me, it's easiest to talk about concrete because that's what I work with. So if we look at the concrete in Denmark, we don't really have a real waste issue. We do use, I think, more than 90% of the concrete waste, but we don't reuse it, we recycle it. So we crush it and use it as a supplement for natural aggregates, sand and stone, in new concretes or on the roads. So we still have a little bit far when it comes to the direct reuse.
So move up in that kind of scale, yeah. And if we, well, now you also solved the problem, but if you where do you think Norway is if you compare it to your neighboring countries?
I think there is a great interest in Norway for what is going on. So a lot of people are coming to see our buildings and take part in our events and everything, but the market in general is not really following up yet. So it's going quite slow, but we've got some good examples, and I think we gain a lot of experience that makes it easier and easier year by year. But I would wish it could go a lot faster.
And you, Satu, if you listen to this, you have both the Finnish perspective, but also a little bit of a global one when you talk about Recreate. So.
Yes, but it's easiest for me to comment on the Finnish situation. And I think the implementation is not there yet, but mentally we're prepared now, I think, for the next big step. So I feel like the general mindset when it comes to circular economy and reuse, it has really evolved a lot in the last 10-15 years, which is the time when I've been working with this topic. So now we're mentally ready and we're standing on that threshold, and we just need to take the next steps to actually move forward with this.
But that is interesting, because we talk about that mental stage, and we talked about that earlier today as well, and to dare to take that first step. So what would you say are the drivers to actually take that first step? What is it that kind of initiates this? If we talk to you, Katja.
Yeah. So I think in Denmark it really is resource utilization. So using the resources where they make the most value, and use the resources we already manufactured. So right now in Denmark we still have the resources necessary to manufacture concrete, but we are talking a lot about depletion of aggregates becoming an issue. I think it's less about the carbon footprint in Denmark, and I think that's kind of important when we talk circular economy, especially when we look at concrete. Because what we see now is that the cement manufacturers are starting to look into things like carbon capture So if they succeed with that in the future, you might be able to buy cement with a very low carbon footprint, and thus also concrete with a very low carbon footprint. So if you're only competing on that term, then circular economy can become a little bit difficult.
Yeah, but that is interesting because we talked a lot about climate today and the emissions. But I know that you have a different driver when we talked at the pre-talks.
Yes, that's super interesting to hear because in Finland the resource depletion is not so much of an issue, and we are a large, sparsely populated country with a lot of undeveloped land. So it's not so much about the resources, but the CO2. And then being able to show that actually low-carbon concrete is a good addition, but if you reuse concrete, you can actually reach a much lower emission level, radically lower. So that's the CO2, that's the main driver for us, clearly.
And what about Norway then?
Yeah, I sort of agree with you, but I also see that many of the reuse buildings that we've done, they are really successful also commercially. So the market is really eager. Tenants are queuing up to come and use those spaces, which is a bit weird because they look a bit unfamiliar for being, especially office buildings, because you can see, you know, the wear and tear on the materials and everything, but I think that has been an important driver so that more actors are eager to have their own reuse buildings too.
So do you think that could be the tipping point for people to actually start to move towards the circular economy, or what do you think would move the business towards it?
Pardon?
How to move the business to more circular economy? What would be like? Is that?
Yeah, I think actually this is that the examples that we have developed are really important because I think they were anxious how this would sort of hit the market and especially the office market, and I think now there is a commercial drive for more buildings like that.
And the other question for today was about how we're going to move this to a global scale. How can we, and what are like the obstacles, but also the possibilities. And I thought it was interesting to hear that you're preparing to upscale. That is one of your goals in make the basis for that. But when we had the pre-chat for this, we talked a lot about building regulations and the obstacles with the regulatory. The obstacles with that sometimes. So, Satu, if you start, what would you say about that? Is it?
Yeah, the regulation that we have, I suppose, in Finland, in the Nordics, and in the EU, largely has been devised from at a time when reuse maybe wasn't that potential. So, like the first step for the upscaling is to have the regulation acknowledge reuse as an equal approach to using virgin materials, because if it's not acknowledged, then there is too much uncertainty how to treat it, and when building inspection officers encounter reuse projects in different locations, they may not know how to handle them, or they are handled in different ways in different cities, and that's an obstacle for upscaling.
So then it comes down to interpretation, knowledge, feeling secure about interpreting the building regulations. Do you see the same thing in your countries?
Absolutely. So I would wish strongly for a push from above, from the lawmakers, in order to push through a lot more on the legislation side. I think that's perhaps the most important tool that we have.
Yeah. What about you, Katja? Yeah,
I totally agree. So how it is today in Denmark, it's not possible to reuse precast concrete elements and still live up to the current legislation. You can apply for a dispensation, but then the building owner will take increased responsibility. And then we also have another issue that might be very national, but 2 years ago we got a new certification scheme for construction engineers. And depending on the kind of tasks you need to do, you might need this certification. And if you ask the people who get it, it's quite expensive to get this certification, and every third year you have to reapply for it. So the construction engineers are also a little bit worried about, if we use these materials as load-bearing, will this affect my possibility to kind of get a renewal of my certification? So that is also something that's becoming a problem, and they don't have anywhere to look. There's no guides, there's no standards telling them how should they handle these materials.
Do you have the same thing in your countries? No?
Well, we've had an issue of our own how the EU's construction products regulation is interpreted in Finland. That's sort of a different issue, but also something that has been specific to us, whereas in Norway, because you're also following the single market rules, or in Sweden, it hasn't been interpreted the same way. So from my perspective, it would be really essential then, when the construction products regulation is renewed in the EU, that they would also introduce the rules for reused products and their own standards for those products, which are different from the standards for new products, so that reused products could compete equally on the market with new ones.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And this whole quality process and testing and quality assurance of materials, can you tell us about how are you handling that in those, like in your project, for example?
Well, I think we're really looking into the experience we already have. So where I work, we have a team that works with condition assessment of existing concrete structures. So we're looking in to the methods they already use a lot. And some of it was already mentioned today, like the georadar that you can use to locate, for example, reinforcement. So we're really looking into the existing methods that's already there, and also looking into what does the legislation say today, how do you document new precast concrete elements, but also how did we produce them earlier on. So we're thinking of combining all this.
And how did you do it in all your projects?
Well, yeah, we are having an interesting process now because, of course, for the load-bearing materials and components that are somehow connected to security and safety, then there's a different story. But there's a lot of materials that are more like surfaces and carpets and easier things to adapt into a building. And we are now developing easier tools to inspect materials like that, often just visually, and go through and to very quickly be able to verify whether the product can be reused or not. And I think that's very important to simplify those processes a lot so that you could really scale it up.
Yeah, we have talked about that in Återhus too, to make that both more efficient and less time-consuming and less, costful to talk about.
And also that you can do it on demolition sites, that you can go around easily, and we're trying to develop apps for cell phones and stuff so that you could register and also upload the materials directly into a database so that you easily can sort of archive all the materials that you're mapping.
And Sata, I know that you talked about that it's the frustration in the beginning where you start a process and that it's more expensive to start there, and then can you tell us a little bit about that? Have you seen it?
Yeah, so I think our approach is sort of similar to Katja's in Ireland. So we also start with a pre-screening before the building is deconstructed, because you don't want to deconstruct something that will not be reusable in the end. And we also draw from condition investigation techniques and experiment with using these indirect methods to study the properties and then to validate that you can actually get reliable results with the indirect methods to optimize the process and make it as cost efficient as possible. And we also start with the standards for the new structures that exist in the construction products regulation, and we try to tap into those as much as we can, and then only do like minor adjustments where that is needed to fit the reused structures and their properties.
So if we're going to get this to a larger scale and make it work, we also need to have a sustainable business model for this, and to have it to
the reused materials to be fed into a successful business model. How do you think that this can work? Do you think that we can get it flying?
Well, I have to say yes. we have to, but I mean, there's no other options. And I think lately we're also being helped a bit by the geopolitical situation, and that the rising prices and the availability has changed a lot during the last couple of years. And I think that that also gives a push in order to force people to think of the materials that we already have in a different way.
Mm. What do you think about value creation and the business model?
I think reuse changes the business model for or actions that the different actors have to take for all the actors that are involved in the value chain, and how then the value is created there for different actors. It varies, and I think also the business aspects, they vary. So they're different for a deconstructor or a demolition company that should turn into a deconstructor and turn into a company that actually produces sort of raw products for the factory refurbisher, the element factory, which then, in addition to making new elements, will also refurbish existing elements, etc., etc. So I think there are these adjustments that need to be made in all the actors, and there we will learn what the sort of value determinants are, and how it can then also become profitable for them. And I think the supply is not the problem. So at least from our perspective, we have city developments where buildings are demolished, could be deconstructed, but we also need demand. So I think the real estate sector is really important in giving that signal that they want to build circular, sustainable buildings. And of course, public policy can also help by introducing CO2 limits for construction, and in that way encourage and also sort of change the business environment so that reuse becomes more profitable.
Mm. Now we talk about the demand and what we have available. It's about the match between those projects. How is that working? What are you in Denmark? How are you going to match between when you demolish the? Have you talked about that?
It's a super good question.
Yeah.
I don't think we're that far in the project, but we have talked a little bit about it. So I think it comes down to also the collaboration between the different people in the value chain, different companies. There are a few projects in Denmark that's also working on digital solutions that will kind of help this matchmaking part go a little bit more smooth. So I know they're working on some different databases and different platforms where you can actually see into the future what type of material will be available at what time. So, for example, saying that you want to demolish a building in 3 years, then you maybe will be able to see that in the platform and search out, oh, does this match anything that I need, and then do a reservation on that. So, to be honest, that part we're kind of leaving to the other projects. Feel like they're in great hands there, but we are looking into how we can design new buildings when we don't have a free choice of, for example, element size and element type. So I think we do need to be a little bit more flexible, but the architects that we have in the project actually see this as a positive challenge. They think it's going to be interesting and fun. So.
And it is interesting because I feel when you talk to people in Sweden, you say that you should have like the technological and digital solution for it, or you talk about having a space where you can store the material until it's needed, or a solution in between. And it's a lot of discussions about how we're going to make this work and how we're going to match it between different projects. Do you have any thoughts about that from your experience? How?
Yeah, we're sort of looking at where the big masses are. So, for example, hollow core slabs could be the type of product that is actually plentifully available in the existing stock. And then certain actors could specialize in, partner up with deconstruction companies to deconstruct the hollow core slabs whenever they encounter them in their projects, and then provide them for the company, an element factory, to refurbish and productize, and maybe they will also then have sort of a partnership with a construction company who has a product where they know that they can use hollow core slabs of a certain size. So we're sort of looking at building those supply chains, which would help to scale up and industrialize the factory refurbishment of the elements. So not so much to look for, like when you have a building, what everything do I have here that I could reuse, but sort of finding the products that we want to focus on, for example, because they are CO2 intensive, and then make sure those get reused in the future in this supply chain.
To start to make it more circular, yeah. And I know, Erland, when we talked before, you also talked about creating value for an employer, that you had an example from for an employer, for an attractive employer. Didn't you talk about that?
Oh yes, yeah, that's true, because I had forgotten, but I spoke with a large facade supplier in Norway that had made a very ambitious green plan for their company, and wanted to do a lot on sustainability all of a sudden. And I was a bit puzzled to hear that, because I didn't really think of that supplier as a very green actor. And then, why did you do this? And then they told me that if we don't have a green profile, we're not able to employ young engineers in the company. So, and that was sort of an unexpected angle for me. But I think that's becoming more and more true for many companies, that you need to have a sort of a green profile in order to be attractive to the young employees.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that the demand is not only from who's going to buy, like the buyers, or for, it's actually the whole value chain is going to demand this at that point. So the last question for today's session is, where will we be in 5 years? And I would call it spåkula. I don't know what you call it in English, but I don't have that one. But maybe you do. What do you think, if you, with all your knowledge here and the projects that you have insinuated, where do you think that we will be in 5 years?
Well, I hope for then in Denmark that we will be in a place where we moved on from single demonstration projects into more generic solutions that can be applied independent of the specific project. And I think to get there, we really need to work together in the whole value chain, and maybe also with other countries in the Nordic as well.
I'm hoping that the companies in Recreate have actually introduced the Recreate practices as part of their business model in the Recreate countries, maybe even beyond. And in addition to that, their competitors, other companies, have also followed up and introduced their competing solutions for the same things.
Yeah, and we are also, as I said, we were working on the intermediate storage, and I think that's within 5 years we will have developed that into a lot of centrals around the country where we can store things. And that is a really important obstacle for us, that we so much of the reuse problematics is about timing. So they're demounting something in one place, but you don't need it for the new project until next spring, for instance. So we need to find solutions for that, and that's quite prosaic and boring, but I think that's also a very important answer from my side.
So I think we have time for a few questions from the audience, if there's any questions to the panel. Yeah, do we have a microphone?
Hello. Thank you for the discussion. I thought it was really interesting. And being a student myself, I'm not sure if this is obvious, for everybody else in the room. But I'm wondering about the exchange of knowledge, because we're talking a lot about like the knowledge on stage, and it's immense. But how do you work together? I'm thinking the EU financed project seems to have a lot of countries involved, so obviously you'll be sharing your results. But I'm thinking if you'd perhaps, Katja, would find like this amazing way to combine two concrete elements, would that be shared somehow in this like more the larger scale of things, the holistic approach? And I suppose that's it.
Yeah, thank you.
I feel maybe that question was for me.
Yeah.
I'll start. So I'll just start by saying that in Denmark there is actually 5 projects that works with this topic, and in Denmark we do collaborate between projects and meet up once in a while and talk about where are there interfaces between the project where we can gain value from the knowledge that we each have and each generate. But when it does come to the international part, we haven't had that much collaboration yet, but I was also hoping that coming here and meeting Satu and Erlend would be an opportunity to also get more international collaboration, because we're willing to share the knowledge we generate.
So maybe that's one part in this going to a larger scale and a global scale. So do we have any more questions for the panel? One over there.
Thanks for the amazing discussion, really nice. I have a question for Erlend, maybe it's valid for everyone else, but in a few projects you mentioned that I've managed to convince the client in keep the building or reusing materials and so on. What would you attribute to this change of mind in the client? Was it the architecture appealing, or was it economical values, or what do you think would be the main argument for convincing clients like you did?
Well, I don't think there is a single recipe for convincing people, but and it depends a lot on the different phases. So you need to sort of see where they're at and when you can sort of sneak in your arguments. And but we are in a quite special situation because we are all the people that are coming to us, they are ambitious in advance, and then we see how far we can sort of stretch their ambition in each and every project. And sometimes we manage to convince them, but other times we don't. So it's not like a perfect formula, unfortunately.
Yeah, I have a question. We talked a lot about architectural flexibility today, and I'm wondering, with your experience, if you have some insight to how property developers have flexibility in their like key numbers and their, maybe I'm talking more to you that have practice experience, but I'm wondering if you see also that there's a flexibility with the key numbers that people want to know in the beginning of architectural development, where that influence the architectural flexibility quite a lot. In Swedish, I'm thinking about BOA, BTA, kalkyl, räntor, all of these things that are important in an early stage that gives the prerequisites for which architecture, how it can be flexible. Do you understand the question?
No.
No.
Frankly, no.
No, I mean, because we talked a lot about how the architectural drawings have to be flexible to be able to fit the products that we don't know that we're drawing for. And I'm saying that the flexibility of the architect usually goes hand in hand with the investment key numbers and key nyckeltal. Yes, thank you. That they need to start the project, to be able to calculate that this is something we want to do. I'm wondering if you have some insights to how those two go hand in hand.
No, not really, but it brings me to a point that we're having also with the municipality, because when we apply the buildings, we don't always know what they're going to look like. So you sort of apply a facade with a sort of a strategy, because you don't know what kind of windows you will fit in there. And that takes a lot of trust from the municipality, but that's something we've gained over the years. But I think it's a good question, but I don't have a good answer, unfortunately.
But I think we have a few developers here today, so after the session you should just grab one of them and ask them. So do we have a more question? Otherwise we will round this off. I think everyone wants us to round it off. So, well, do you have any last final words you want to share with the audience? No.
I do, actually, if I may. So this is an idea that I've used in Finland, and I don't know if it resonates here, but people usually know that after the Second World War there was an industrialization of construction, which was a really big change. So I've compared the transition to circular construction to that transition from sort of artisanal construction to industrialized construction, that it's a change that is as large as that one was, or maybe even larger. So we have to sort of understand that it requires a total transformation from the whole sector. So no architect can do it alone. The real estate investors, they can't do it alone, but we all must together change the way we do things.
I think that will be the words to wrap this up for today. Give a warm applause to the panel.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Tack. Superbra jobbat. Thank you. Thank you so much. We are so very, very close to the end. Not quite there yet. Humankind will not be able to face up to climate change, not to mention resolving it, on the strength of technology, economics, and conventional politics alone. To rise to the occasion, we deepen in our shared humanity. That is a psychological and even spiritual invitation, a basic call to consciousness. That quote by Alistair McIntosh is in your bag. Hang on to it or pass it on to someone who needs it, or exchange it with someone here with a message on the backside. You also have a blank red and green note, and before you leave, we will ask you to write something on those. So you might just want to locate them now. When I looked at the post-it notes that you set up outside here, I noticed that you were talking a lot about this mind shift that were also the last words here from this panel. The, if you will, pedagogy of reusage. So how to convince, discuss, understand things. And we have one last Menti question for you, and then we will say thank you to the ones who need thank you. So can we get, yes, that one, which is, what am I inspired to do differently after today? More of something, less of something, complete shift. It doesn't have to be everything you thought about today, or sort of the most brilliant answer you ever given, because I know that you're a little tired, but something, yeah. Change my employer, wow. Not giving up. Eat more chicken, yep. Yeah, come back more, reuse more. Become a politician, yeah. Collaborate, challenge. Can you scroll down a little? Work less. Work less and say yes. Ask uncomfortable questions. Use storytelling. Yeah. Great things. More people turning into politicians. This is interesting. Ask more, quote, stupid questions. Inspire and question. So many great things that will happen tomorrow. It's Friday. You can start tomorrow. So I have lied to you, and I apologize for that. This beautiful stage that I'm standing on is not created by the amazing students that gave you lollipops, but actually by Co-Design. And Co-Design has also sponsored the environment here and rigged the space and designed so that there are places for you to put up post-its and the exhibition works and so on and so forth. And particularly a huge thank you to Jonathan Wahlstedt, Hanna Bandman, Aram Eckerbom, Ida Isaksson, Staffan Virke, Johan Alvfors, and also Reacham, which is the event agency, and particularly Birgitta Törnström or Robert Ahlström. So maybe one of those that you do so well for these people. Woohoo! Thank you. Thank you. And maybe while you waited for hours and hours for your food, you saw the amazing sponsors that are also enablers of this. So those are Ramböll, Fabege, Sengun, Contiga, NREP, and particularly for this beautiful stuff on stage and in the space here, Press och Son och Dahl Agenturer. So why not give them as well a hand? Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. There are more lollipops, by the way, on the way out if you feel the need. So, Jelena och Nadine, please join me on stage for a sort of farewell and what now. Welcome back.
Do I have to turn this on?
You just push it up.
Vi tappade ett namn. We dropped one name. Peter Ullstad also.
Ja. Of course, not on my list. It's always sort of the key person that falls off. It's like everybody knows it, of course.
Yeah, it's a lot of names, a lot of people working. So.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, what are we supposed to do now?
Please come a bit closer. So we're very soon going to send them out for drinks and some fresh air. But what is it that you want to say about the next step after this conference? What is it that you would like to sort of, what are you inspired to do after this day? Nadine?
Mingle.
No? Nadine?
What was so obvious for me today is that there are so many parallels in the different countries and the different projects, the way we're taking on this task of changing the construction industry, the projects that we're driving, the conclusions that we've been drawing. And I think what I would love to see is that we, as the panels that just we're sitting here, collaborate more, not just over disciplines and over organizations, but maybe over borders. Let's make a Nordic project, Nordic conference next year. No, next year. It's a bit short time until.
Yeah. Yeah, we can give it to you 1 year. Not next week, but next year.
That would be a lot of fun to really dive into all the solutions a little bit more on the number and on markkänsla nivå.
Beautiful. What are your thoughts, Jelena?
Yeah, I hope that, as I said before, I'm just going to repeat myself, that this day gets new seeds for new collaborations and projects. I hope everybody here has a new contact today.
Yeah.